Hello, hello, or should I say g'day? Is it me, or recently has every British person either moved from the UK to Australia, is planning on moving to Australia this year or next year, or is at least talking and saying they're thinking about moving to Australia? If you've noticed this as well, you're not the only one. Brits currently make up Australia's largest migrant population, with 1.1 million of us currently living there, which is around 4.4% of the total population. Migration in general has been increasing, so much so that it rose by 1/3 last year to lift Australia's population by a record 659,000 people. In fact, I'm fresh off the boat myself, as they say, having moved from the UK to Australia 3 weeks ago. I'm actually half Australian myself, so my mum's side is all Australian, hence why I was so easily able to come here, as I do have an Australian passport. But I'm not the only one I know who has come over here. I had a really good friend last year. I know another girl who even moved a couple of days, I think, before me to Australia, and I've got another friend I know thinking about coming over in spring, and then plenty of others who want to come and work here for a little bit, or are generally thinking about migrating here as well. And with migration on the rise year on year to Australia, it's a trend that I suspect will continue. I will continue to see lots of Brits giving up their UK life and coming to Australia with the idea of having better prospects. But exactly why are so many Brits ditching the UK at the moment and moving to Australia? Aside from the obvious, the shared language and culture and a close relationship with Australia, despite being so far apart geographically, I think there's a few newer and more significant reasons as to why so many Brits are migrating. So to start off with the reasons, one of the biggest ones absolutely has to be the cost of living crisis in the UK at the moment, which is definitely a large influence on my reasons to move from the UK to Australia. Put simply, everything in the UK just keeps getting more and more and more expensive year on year, and I was just sick of it. And this wouldn't be an issue if wages were also getting more and more and more, but they're not. Traveling around the UK is just crazy expensive at the moment. And to give you some examples of the kind of pricing on train tickets I was paying, a return journey during the week commuting in from Cambridge to London for work would cost me about £25 Cambridge to Liverpool Street with advanced single tickets, and this was with a rail card added on. So if you're not from the UK, in the UK we have a rail card, I think up to the age of 18 to 30, I believe, which gets you 1/3 off all rail fares. Because they know how ridiculously expensive and unaffordable they are to young people, they give us 1/3 off till we're about 30. We do have to pay money for this rail card though, so it's not like it's just free. You do have to take a certain amount of train journeys to get your money back, but it's not really that hard to make up for it. A couple of train journeys and you've pretty much paid off, or more so saved, the amount that you spent on the rail card on train journeys. Without this rail card, a return journey Cambridge to London would be about £40, which is a lot. And if you're a commuter coming into London, not just from a large commuting city like Cambridge, but any of the others, you are going to be paying a lot in travel costs. Getting the train has just become so ridiculously expensive. So much so that it's even now cheaper if you're driving with a few other people, just to drive instead, which at a time where we're supposed to be very environmentally focused and the UK should be promoting more environmentally friendly policies, such as getting public transport instead of driving and encouraging people to do this, making public transport so much more ridiculously expensive to the point where it's cheaper to drive just doesn't make sense. And it almost feels like we're going backwards instead of forwards to, a greener and better future. On the other hand, the tube is also ridiculously expensive. One tube journey in London costs £2.80, which for a return journey you're looking at over £5. And if you're making this every single day, or even just adding this as a add-on to a visit to London for the day, it really adds up and it is expensive. To show you how expensive this is in comparison to Sydney here, it's costing me $1 to get the tube or their kind of metro system around the city. And this is for a lot, as I'm currently in Newtown, so quite central. I'm not being the metro very far out, but within the inner city bits, this is the equivalent of 50p per journey. So it's costing me, you know, £1 maybe to travel into the city, and that compared to the £5 plus, it's literally a fifth of the price as it would be in London. And I'm comparing these two large cities to try and keep the comparison fair. I'm aware that travel can differ a lot when it comes to pricing in the UK for buses, and we've even got trams and bits, but for a London to Sydney comparison, it is just so much cheaper to travel around within a city here and actually go out and do things. Another example which comes to mind is I went from Circular Quay, which is this kind of central ferry hub in the centre of Sydney where all the ferries go from to the different beaches and northern parts of Sydney, and for a return journey to Manly Beach, which is pretty much one of the furthest ones you can go to. This was, I think, just checking my note, it was $9.35 for a return journey. On the other hand, in London, just before I left, I got the Thames Uber, the Uber Thames, I can't remember which way around, all the way to the eastern end of London, cost me £9. Food and kind of eating out is another one that's become really expensive in the UK. I can't be the only one who's noticed the increase in coffee prices. You're not really going to be paying even less than kind of £3.50, sometimes £4 or £5 for a coffee in London and other major cities. I'm paying about $4, $5 maybe max, which is about £2.50. And the same with brunch meals and getting lunch out. It's just so much more affordable to go out and get casual coffees and treats and kind of feel like you're getting a better quality of life and actually able to do more things on a daily basis without having to have a high salary to enable you to have these kind of small luxuries like you do more so in the UK. And this would all be okay in the UK if wages were also increasing to be able to match these prices. But in reality, they're just not. Minimum wage in the UK, for example, in the highest age bracket is currently £11.40, whereas here in Sydney, it's $24.10, which is the equivalent of £12.28. So you have there a 70p difference, which doesn't seem like a lot. But when you scale this to an annual salary amount, in the UK on minimum wage, you're annually earning £23,712, whereas in Sydney you would earn £25,542 for doing exactly the same hours, exactly the same job. It's just nearly a £2,000 difference. You see where I'm coming from? With higher wages on average here and lower costs every day, it's really easy to feel like you can simply just get more for your money, or simply, if you're doing the same amount of work, you can get more, or you can get the same amount for doing even less and having a better home-life balance. And on top of that, Australia actively welcomes skilled migrants, which makes it really easy for people in corporate jobs in London or in the UK to come over and pretty much get a similar job here and just get more money for it. And I can't forget to discuss housing at the moment. Australia actually has some of the largest houses in the world, with each home having around an average of 215 square meters of floor space. Juicy, right? And this is more than double that, the average of the UK homes. What's more, 1 in 10 Australians actually have a private swimming pool, which in the UK you have to be absolutely filthy rich to even dream of having. And 80% Australians have private gardens, which if you're living somewhere like London, it's going to be hard to get, or you're going to have to pay a lot for a house that has a garden, and a decent sized one if that. I'm aware that a lot of these factors, such as housing, food and travel, aren't exactly new though. So this brings me back to the original question of why exactly are Brits moving from the UK now in particular to come to Australia? What's triggered this kind of new wave of movement? A large key factor is that Australia changed their rules on who from Britain they can allow in. So they actually raised the age limit from 30 to 35 for those who they would allow to have a holiday working visa, meaning that millions more people suddenly became eligible including my partner, who is 33, and we thought we'd missed the boat, missed being able to come over at his current age, and would have to look into alternative means. But that rule changing meant that suddenly he is eligible for a holiday working visa. There's also been a change in the type of work that you have to do coming over here. So prior to this rule change, anyone who came over on a holiday working visa had to commit to 88 days of agricultural work, often on farms, and this would need to be carried out for every additional year that the person wanted to stay, which isn't exactly the most appealing offer, particularly those coming from less hands-on jobs, such as more corporate office-based jobs. The idea of having to go to a farm and pick fruit would be enough to deter a lot of people from coming over who otherwise would have. My partner's brother actually came to Australia about 5 years ago and was unlucky enough to be stuck with watermelon picking, which I think is probably one of the most heavy laborious ones you can do. And yeah, he came home early and didn't want to renew his visa. No surprise, because I think the prospect of him being in fields picking watermelons all day was enough to put him off. But now that's been scrapped, you can fully come from the UK to Australia and no manual labour up to 35, which means a lot of people who previously wouldn't have are now reconsidering their prospects. You know, there's nothing to lose. And finally, to finish up, I can't not mention the weather, can I? Seasonal depression is a real thing in the UK, and with the autumn, winter, and sometimes even the spring just being rubbish all year round, dark, gloomy, grey, cold, wet, the idea of coming to a tropical paradise where you have so much more daylight is really appealing. It's common for us Brits to, we have the jokes about asking about the weather and moaning about the weather, but it's because it is simply just so miserable for most of the year. And the prospect of coming over and having so much more daylight in the morning and in the evening to actually go out and do things like you can sit in a pub, outside, or at a bar in the evening for a lot of the year, whereas in the UK we can only simply dream of doing that in the summer, because who's going to sit outside in the dark, at a pub when it's cold and it's wet and it's like 5 degrees? Yeah, no one. And there's something lovely about the cozy, indoors in the autumn and the winter. But I don't know, is that better than the summer? I don't think so. And with so much more light and weather here, it's no wonder that there is generally a much more active and healthier lifestyle culture here in Australia, with outside activity being promoted so much more. Whereas in the UK, it's so much easier to haul up inside, but I never really felt like personally that benefited my health physically and mentally. Whereas with more light and more physical activity and being able to afford to do more things, I feel more like I'm thriving and actually living better than I did in the UK. And I know you're only thinking, but Lottie, you've literally been there 3 weeks. How can you be saying this already? And it's true, it has only been 3 weeks, and I'm conscious that this might just be the honeymoon phase, and it might all end when I actually settle into regular living. But at least for the short term, that's generally the differences that I've noticed upon living here, and that's why I wanted to talk today about. That's all I've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed this quite quick and casual chatty video. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or evening, and hopefully I will see you very soon. Bye!